When Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Links released in 2016, it had a simpler rule set and a smaller card pool than the current trading card game, as well as introducing the new skills mechanic, which could allow players to boost their decks in a lot of specific ways. Over time, Synchro XC's Pendulum and Links were integrated into the game, plus many cards unavailable at launch, but the power level of these cards wasn't the same. Some cards, which saw little to no play in the competitive formats, were very good and even downright broken in Duel Links. And at number 10 on this list, we have a level 8 Gemini Fiend, Poly-chemicritter Dioxogre. It has 2000 attack and 200 defense, and like all Gemini monsters, is treated as a normal monster in the field until you burn another normal summon to gain access to its effect. Or in this case, effects, because Poly-chemicritter Dioxogre has multiple. Firstly, the normal summon of Gemini monsters cannot be negated, and secondly, you can banish a Gemini monster from your graveyard once per turn to target and destroy an opponent's card. This card was an offensive cornerstone of Chemicritter decks, a viable rogue strategy up until late 2022. It's not as strong as the other cards on this list, hence it's at the bottom of this list. But for a time, it was one of the rarest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Links, and Gemini strategies would have likely seen more experimentation if Dioxogre was easier to obtain. But it was not. Periodically, Duel Links will have time-based events in which certain anime characters or special versions of them will wander the duel world for players to challenge, offering chances at exclusive rewards for beating them. Often, these rewards would later become available in-game through tickets, typically obtained as login rewards or while climbing the ranked ladder. For Poly-chemicritter Dioxogre, this was not the case. The Inglorious Bastion event lasted, probably a reference to the movie Inglourious Basterds by Quentin Tarantino, lasted a few weeks, and gave players a chance to get their copies of Dioxogre during its first run in November 2018, and again in June of 2019. Outside of those windows, players had access to one copy of Dioxogre by grinding Bastion to level 40. This was doubly annoying because it took a lot of time, and because Bastion remains one of the most tedious legendary duelists to unlock in the game, requiring players to win 50 duels with 3 or less cards remaining in their main deck. In January 2021, Poly-chemicritter Dioxogre was finally added to the card trader, making it easier to obtain as many copies as you like. In the end, Dioxogre wasn't the best card, but it was valuable to have in Duel Links as it gave access to an entire strategy otherwise basically unplayable, which is much more than can be said for its lackluster performance in the TCG. And at number 9 on this list, we have Mirror Wall, a continuous trap card that halves the attack of any opponent's monster brave enough to attack, and remains in place as long as the player is willing to pay 2,000 life points as a maintenance cost during the standby phase. Debuted in the TCG over 2 decades ago as a super rare in the 2002 set Pharaoh Servant, Mirror Wall was also around pretty early in the life of Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Links. Introduced in December 2016 as part of the game's second main box, Neo Impact, Mirror Wall served a useful niche in the early game. Unlike the TCG, staples of spell and trap removal like Mystical Space Typhoon and Heavy Storm weren't around to threaten Mirror Wall's board presence, making it more likely that trap might actually hang around for an extra turn. Duel Links' reduced life point count of 4,000 did make it difficult for players to see more than 2 turns of Mirror Wall, but a single card that could buy you 2 more turns, or more with the help of life point boosting skills, was very worth running. But the real strength of Mirror Wall in Duel Links was actually its maintenance costs. Since the beginning of the game, Yami-Yugi's Destiny Draw has been one of the strongest generic skill options, allowing players to search any card in their deck in lieu of a draw once 2,000 or more life points have been lost. This calls to the Pharaoh's power over Destiny within the Duel Monsters anime, and how he could manipulate fate to draw the correct card when backed against the wall. In early Duel Links, Mirror Wall was one of the most reliable ways to bloodlet 2,000 life points and search any card in your deck without accidentally losing the game. In the anime, Mai Valentine used Mirror Wall against Yugi in the Duelist Kingdom finals as a representation of the impenetrable wall she would put to prevent others from knowing her. However, her defenses crumbled when she eventually surrendered, just as she had outside of the game by becoming friends with Yugi and the crew. Finally, the threat of Mirror Wall actually propelled the Harpie Lady deck into one of Duel Links' first dominant strategies. Mai Valentine's Harpie Hunting Ground skill ensured access to the field spell of the same name, which pops a spell or trap card in the field every time a Harpie Lady monster is summoned. The Harpies have a long history in Duel Links, and have oscillated in and out of the competitive rankings as new cards and ban lists adjusted their power level, and we'll be talking more about them a little later on this list. But back to our favorite continuous trap. As more options for backward removal began to trickle into the game, the relevance of Mirror Wall dropped off. But for a time, it offered unparalleled defense and offense in the form of stopping all of your opponent's monsters from attacking, and facilitating your search of any card from your deck. It did, however, see a smattering of placements in the TCG. Though not enough to be considered good, this small amount of competitive viability keeps it trapped in at number 9. Splashing down at number 8 is Citadel Whale. This monster is a retrain of Fortress Whale, a non-effect ritual monster used by Mako Tsunami against Joey Wheeler in the Battle City arc of the Duel Monsters anime, and retains some of its predecessor's qualities, including its level of 7, water attribute and fish typing, and its stat line of 2350 attack and 2150 defense. Luckily for Citadel Whale, it's not a ritual monster, and has the much easier summoning condition of tributing 2 water monsters to special summon itself from the hand or graveyard. Unfortunately for Citadel Whale, it didn't release into the TCG until 2017, way past the point when its okay attack and useful but slow effect would have been competitive. On special summon, Citadel Whale can search and set a copy of Sea Stealth attack directly from your deck, and once per turn you can negate and destroy a card with an effect that targets a single water monster. This is pretty good, especially for a card that can special summon itself from multiple places. And Sea Stealth attack is pretty good too. It can activate Umi from your hand or graveyard, and protects your monsters from battle by destroying any opponent's monster to clash with a level 5 or higher water monster at the start of the damage step. It can protect your spells and traps, including itself from destruction, by banishing 1 water monster until the end phase. Citadel Whale alone could pretty much neutralize an opponent's battle phase and any destruction removal they might have. This was absolutely not enough to gain recognition in the TCG, but in Duel Links, you could call Citadel Whale a big fish in a small pond. Releasing there in early 2018, the presence of cards like Moray of Greed and Fishborg Launcher, and absence of strong board clear and banishing strategies made Citadel Whale not just a force to be reckoned with, but a fish to be feared. Mill decks have always lingered at the periphery of competitive Duel Links pretty much ever since inception on account of the reduced main deck size of 20 to 30 cards, and it's in the spirit of burning through as many cards as possible that we're dedicating number 7 spot on this list to, a level 3 fire insect, Warm Worm. This toasted little guy has 600 attack and 1400 defense, and the effect of milling 3 cards off the top of your opponent's deck whenever it's destroyed, with no limits on how many times you can activate it per turn. This means that in a Warm Worm mill strategy against a player using the typical 20 cards in their main deck, victory can be ensured with the destruction of 5 Warm Worms, and often less with some stall. Early revival options like Regretful Rebirth and Limit Reverse could rekindle extinguished spent worms, and combos like Insect Imitation into level 2 Gokipon could special summon more worms from the deck. But the key to early Duel Links mill strategies was a normal trap that worked in concert with Warm Worm, Assault on GHQ. This normal trap destroyed one of your monsters in exchange for milling the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. Critically, Assault on GHQ destroys instead of tributes, which triggers Warm Worm, meaning 1 worm could now mill 5 cards, almost a third of your opponent's deck. The trap also synergized with a lot of other stall strategies used by Warm Worm Mill. A Faint Plan could save your Warm Worm, or even better, sometimes Jowls of Dark Demise, by preventing your opponent from targeting set monsters with attacks. Jowls could then steal your opponent's monster, allowing you to destroy your opponent's card to mill their deck. The same effect could be accomplished, and often was, with Enemy Controller, another Duel Links staple. But despite their prominence in Duel Links, neither Warm Worm nor Assault on GHQ saw any play at all in the TCG. In the case of Worm, even though it debuted more than a decade ago, by 2009, filling your opponent's graveyard was still risky on account of Chaos and other strong grave-reliant strategies. Assault on GHQ released a little earlier in 2005, but still saw no competitive play, because destroying a monster on your field for no effect on your opponent is just not a good move. It definitely wormed its way into its own niche in the Duel Links competitive meta, and it is adorable, but Warm Worm lands on a lower end of this list because the mill strategy centered around it never rose above an interesting, if gimmicky, rogue deck. And because it's thematically apt to dedicate a second spot on this list to Gemini monsters, and what's more, 2 Gemini monsters, we're giving the number 6 spot to Evocator Chevalier and Dark Valkyria. These 2 Geminis aren't quite twins, but they share a decent attack stat for level 4 normal summon at 1900 and 1800 respectively. Combined, they have 3 competitive placements out of a 28 some years of TCG viability, which is not great. But in Duel Links, decks running 3 copies of these cards were dangerous. They both carry the Gemini effect of being treated as a normal monster until their second summon, where the effects they would have access to are also quite similar. Dark Valkyria would gain 1 spell counter and 300 attack, and the ability to remove a spell counter, losing its attack boost, to target and destroy a monster on the field. Meanwhile, on its second normal summon, Evocator Chevalier can send 1 equipped card you control to the graveyard to destroy 1 card in the field. The mechanics are a little different, but both provided targeted removal. And in the 2018 era of Duel Links, that was strong. The Gemini support Supervise could equip to Evocator Chevalier and grant its effect, allowing you to pop an opponent's card, and then special summon a normal or Gemini monster from your graveyard. The normal spell Gemini Spark gave your Gemini monsters even more utility. It would tribute your monster but destroy an opponent's card and then give you a draw. Despite the inherent limitations of all Gemini monsters, the slower pace of and reduced power level of Duel Links gave the Evocator Chevalier / Dark Valkyria combo Time in the Sun is one of the most consistent removal strategies yet available in the game. And for our number 5 spot, we have a spicy normal spell that you've probably heard of, but only if you play Duel Links, where it's currently limited to 1 copy. Despite seeing 0 competitive placements in other formats, we're talking about Star Blast. This card, available in the TCG since 2009, allows you to reduce a level of monster in your hand by any amount at the cost of 500 life points per level. So the upsides, you can normal summon a high level monster without tribute, at a cost. And with your normal summoned better spent on searchers and combo starters, there's a good chance you wouldn't want to do it this way. So why is this card kinda busted in Duel Links? Normal summoning a high level monster is better in Duel Links than in other formats, since your opponent will have less options to deal with your instant boss monster. But the good part about this card is actually the life point cost. Remember back at the beginning of this list with the Mirror Wall and how its 2000 life point cost could help you activate Yamayugi's Destiny Draw skill? This is like that, but much better. Because it's a spell, and if you reduce a monster's level by 6, you can pay as much as 3000 life points. There are a few uses for this and many draw sense skills that minimize the RNG of your next top deck through life point loss. But the flexibility of Star Blast really shines with trickier skills like Yugimoto's Access Denied. This skill can be activated once per duel from your 5th turn onwards when you have 1000 or less life points, and when used, prevents you and your opponent from summoning effect monsters or activated monster effects until the end of your opponent's next turn. Although the skill is difficult to use, it can let you normal summon Yugi's board clearing ace, Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction, while reducing your life points beneath the threshold for Access Denied. This means that you can use Gandora to wipe the field of all other cards, and then lock your opponent out of monsters for their next turn, making it very difficult for them to defend against your push for game, or recover should they survive the turn. Since most defensive hand traps such as Kiteroid and Sphere Karibo are monsters, the Gandora/Access Denied combo locks your opponent's field in hand, and if you wait to use Access Denied after you special summon some additional monsters, you'll be able to circumvent your side of the floodgate. Another lethal application of Star Blast was to easily trigger the Chaz Princeton skill, Ojama Overflow. Typically a situational skill for emergencies, usable only when your life points are at 500 or below. This skill, when activated, summons Ojama tokens in defense mode to all of your opponent's open monster spaces. In the era before link monsters in the extra monster zone, this could be a floodgate on its own, preventing your opponent from summoning at all if they have no high level monsters or self-removal. Even in the link era, you probably don't want to give your opponent a bunch of free monsters. This skill is still dangerous and concerned with Star Blast, since the two can easily be used together to summon Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound to attack with piercing multiple times per game. It also has applications with the Paradox Brothers 3-star Demotion skill and Double Summon, where for a turn, you can normal summon a high level monster if your life points are 1000 or below. What all of these admittedly gimmicky strategies have in common is how Star Blast allows Duel Links players to access their back against the wall skills all on their own terms. Thundering into number 4 is a normal spell Restructer Revolution. It released in the TCG in 2005, but has been around in the OCG since 1999. Like many early spells, its effect is very simple. Burn your opponent equal to 200 times the number of cards in their hand. With 4000 starting life points, this card was actually one of the most broken cards in the history of Duel Links. Burn was actually so overtuned in the Duel Links environment that Konami would eventually decide in 2020 to have many instances of burn damage in the game. Funnily enough, Restructer Revolution was spared this indignity, probably because, like Massive Morph, it had already been hustled onto the Limit 1 list. But what besides being burned made Restructer Revolution so good? The answer was Taya Gardner, a playable character with the dual standby skill. Adjusted a few times over the years, the main effect of this skill is allowing both players to start with 5 cards in hand. In 2018, when you could play 3 copies of Restructer Revolution next to cards like Tama and Cup of Ace, the dual standby burn was a valid strategy that could net you a King of Games win without your opponent taking a turn. Not only did Restructer Revolution burn start at 1000 points with the skill increase start in hand, but it mitigated the downside to Cup of Ace. A spell card lets you flip a coin, and if heads, you draw 2 cards, but if tails, your opponent drew 2 cards. Which meant that generally, Cup of Ace did not resolve in your favor, unless you wanted your opponent to have more cards so you could burn them for more damage. But if they failed Cup of Ace, your Restructer Revolution would now burn your opponent for 1400 damage, likely more than a quarter of their life points. And if you called the toss, you would just draw more copies of your burn cards like more Restructer Revolutions, or even another Cup of Ace. In the TCG, Restructer Revolution's burn isn't just bad, but laughably bad. Just truly bleak. But this is part of what makes Duel Links so interesting. Cards that would be better as kindling in different formats can be shatteringly good here. Claiming the number 3 spot on this list with Mercenary Swiftness, we have Wiz Sage for Hire. The For Hire cards are a guild of anthropomorphic animal adventurers, and their playstyle reflects this. The smaller For Hires all share an effect to special summon another For Hire from the hand, and when one of their fellow adventurers is summoned to the field, their individual effects activate. This makes them great for swarming, and you can finish your summoning chain with one of their boss monsters, who have effects that are stronger with more For Hires on the field. Wiz, an anthropomorphic octopus, is one of those bosses, and a level 7 water spellcaster with 1600 attack and 2800 defense. When Wiz hits the field, she can increase your life points by 500 for each For Hire you control. But this isn't what made Wiz fearsome in Duel Links. Instead, it was Wiz's other effect. Discarding a For Hire monster to negate the activation of your opponent's effect, that earns the Spell Sword Wizard such a high spot on this list. For Hires were so powerful in fact that they achieved Tier 0 status, meaning they completely dominated their format. Because there are less Omni or near Omni negates available in Duel Links, going second is often advantageous over going first for OTK decks. With any 2 For Hires followed by Dyna Hero For Hire, these furry adventurers had a blisteringly consistent formula for winning on turn 2, but Wiz boosted their chances when taking turn 1, and was eventually saddled with a limit 2 restriction as a result. The other For Hire boss in Duel Links, Dyna, was actually stuck with limit 1, but because Duel Links pools the ban list, Wiz's limit 2 actually was far more severe. For many years, Duel Links kept staple cards like Enemy Controller at 2. Putting Wiz Sage for Hire at 2 alongside fellow furry Dampa for Hire meant that an optimal For Hire deck could no longer run any copies of Enemy Controller. And that's not all, because For Hires typically ran only monsters in one spell, Mayhem for Hire. They're in Archetype Monster Reborn, they became one of the first decks to utilize the massively powerful Treacherous Trap Hole. All of this ended when Wiz was limited to 2. With Dampa required as a consistency booster with its removal effect, duelists were forced to choose between running one Wiz, Enemy Controller, or Treacherous Trap Hole, or even foregoing defense entirely to run a second Dampa. Wiz Sage for Hire's interesting chemistry with the ban list and its powerful Spell Trap negate earns it a spot near the top of this list, but sadly, or gladly, it did see a few scattered placements in the TCG, so it falls short of catching a spot in first or second place. Now, the Omni Negate is one of the strongest effects in Yu-Gi-Oh across all formats. Many modern first-turn strategies are built around assembling as many Omni Negates as possible, and seemingly random cards from nowhere, unremarkable archetypes become staples if they can levy an Omni Negate. Because they're so good, Omni Negates often carry restrictions on their use or heavy cost. Solemn Judgment is a blanket almost Omni Negate, and no one cares about its activation cost of half your life points. To this day, it remains one of the best trap cards in the game. So what requirement can make this game-changing effect not worth the trouble? This is the question that brings us to Champion's Vigilance, an Omni Negate that was only ever good in Duel Links. Available since the start of the game in 2016, this card was easily accessible as a dual reward for defeating Seto Kaiba, and easily activatable by meeting its requirements of having one level 7 or higher normal monster on the field. Once upon a time, it was possible to run 3 copies of Champion's Vigilance in your 20-card deck, which could turn your vanilla ace monster into a proper win condition. Kaiba Man and Ancient Rules could turn your Blue Eyes White Dead Draw into a premium attacker capable of Uno reversing your opponent after attacking them, watching an animation for extra swing points when you're playing Seto Kaiba. So, how come this card never caught on the TCG if Omni Negates are so good? It might have come out a long time ago now in 2011, but that was still way too late for it to overcome its drawback of forcing you to run normal monsters and being a trap card. Outside of Duel Links, running normal monsters that require 2 tributes is too much of a consistency sacrifice to justify the deck space you'd have to be dedicating for the chance of pulling this card off. Even decks that revolve around normal monsters like Dark Magician and Red Eyes Black Dragon have the boon of searchability within their archetype, and operate with the goal of getting their more powerful extra deck monsters on the field rather than letting their level 7 normals push for game. What's better for this list than a Duel Links stable with one of the best effects in the game and almost no use outside the format? How about a cool new anime boss monster that reignited viability for an entire deck? Way back at number 9 on Mirror Wall, we mentioned that we talk about Harpies again, and here it is. The level 8 Synchro Cyber/Harpie Lady. This wind-type wing beast carries a decent attack set of 2600 attack and 1400 defense, and the incredible once per turn quick effect of target and bounce one monster on the field back to the hand in response to the activation of a spell or trap card. Like many members of the Harpie archetype, Cyber/'s name becomes Harpie Lady while it's on the field or in the graveyard, making it fill the conditions to activate Elegant Egotist, a spell card that, when you control Harpie Lady, summons another Harpie Lady or Harpie's Lady sister from the deck. Elegant Egotist is a quick way to get Cyber/ on the field too, since it also has the effect that a Harpie Lady can be treated as a tuner for its Synchro summon. Overall, Cyber/Harpie Lady is a cool piece of legacy support for an anime featured archetype, with sweet art and almost no use in the competitive TCG. Unfortunately, Cyber Slash's bounce effect was entirely reactive, and not enough to secure competition use when it was added in late 2020, and the years since haven't changed that. But don't worry, Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Links is an environment where cards like Cyber Slash really sparkle. Added to Duel Links in early 2021, Cyber Slash Harpie Lady immediately propelled Harpie's ladies back to tiered status, something they hadn't enjoyed since the early game years before. A main deck size of 20, and 3 different additional ways of accessing Elegant Egotist with Harpie Perfumer, Harpie Channeler, and Hysteric Sign made Cyber Slash Harpie Lady frighteningly consistent, and the Harpie's Hunting Ground skill guaranteed you could pop back row while bouncing your opponent's monsters when going second, or augment any defensive card you set with a bounce when going first. Swallow's Nest, a spell which could allow you to summon level 4 or lower winged beast monster from your deck at the cost of tributing one, provided even more ways of guaranteeing access to Elegant Egotist, and served as excellent defense that could trigger both Cyber Slash's bounce and Harpie Hunting's ground removal. In the TCG, Cyber Slash Harpie Lady never got off the ground, but in Duel Links, this Harpie Queen, wait, that's a different card, flew, and for that, it swoops in to snatch the #1 spot. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other cards that were only good in Duel Links that I might have missed, or have ideas for future videos like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.